Hello, A Push Prep Summer Tutoring crew. How are you guys doing? It's another one of those lecture type videos as we go into the New England colonies. Like I told you in the last video, we are chipping away at the early Americas right now. This is the early United States, right before the Revolutionary War. We are going to set up this dynamic of sorts, and then the Revolutionary War will happen. Okay, we are going to talk about the Massachusetts Bay Colony as first. So, in the early 17th century, the Puritan community was divided into two groups: separatist Puritans and non-separatist Puritans. Separatist Puritans saw themselves as different from the corrupt English society around them. Disillusioned with the Anglican Church and by the king's challenge to their beliefs, they fled to the New World in the beginning of the 17th century. They established what they felt were ideal Christian communities at Plymouth, Salem, Dover, and Portsmouth. By contrast, moderate non-separatist Puritans remained in England because they believed that they could still reform the church from the inside. In 1603, moderate Puritans in England hoped the new monarch, James I, would be sympathetic to their views, since he had been raised as a Calvinist Scotland. Although this did not prove to be the case, the Puritans still tried to work within the religious system while he was king. So, we have this group of Puritans that wanted to basically escape from England on the basis of religion. And that group went to America. And you've heard this story before. They fled to America to escape religious views. Well, that's in some parts the case, but in other parts they did it because they felt like they could no longer reform the church in England. But the non-separatist half of the Puritans still thought there was still chance that they could reform the England, the Church of England. So, in 1929, James' son, King Charles I, dismissed Parliament and allowed the anti-Puritan Archbishop of Canterbury, William Laud, to tighten royal control over the church. He removed ministers from Puritan tendencies and threatened church elders who harbored such ministers. With these increasing pressures from the crown, the non-separatist Puritans no longer felt they could remain in England within the Anglican fold and decided to migrate to the New World. They remained committed to reforming the Church of England and claimed that they did not want to separate from the Church only from its impurities. So they want to separate from the bad stuff of the church, but they still want to be involved in the church. They wanted to see change in, in the church. A group of non-separatist Puritans secured a royal charter from King James I to form the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1629. The Massachusetts Bay Colony was primarily intended to be a business venture, but the colony was also used as a refuge for Puritans. In 1630, nearly 1,000 settlers in 11 ships arrived on the rocky Massachusetts coast, becoming the largest group to immigrate to the New World at one time. In the decade that followed, between 16,000 and 20,000 settlers came to the New England region due to turmoil in Britain, a movement that came to be called the Great Migration. The Massachusetts colonists did not face nearly as many hardships as the Jamestown and Plymouth settlers before them did. The colonists had taken careful steps to prepare for their venture, and they also received a constant flow of new settlers, which helped replenish supplies and helped the colony grow. Many of the immigrants were well educated, and their skills helped the Bay Company succeed in various industries. Since the soil in the Northeast was not favorable to farming, the Bay Colony made the most of the forest and water resources by establishing mills for grain and lumber, developing the fishing industry, using the local timber for shipbuilding, and using the harbors to promote trade. The Bay Colony quickly became the largest and most influential of all the New England colonies. The British New England colony included Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. While there were still several large communities within the Bay Colony, the city of Boston became the capital for the group. So let's no. Hold up. There we go. It printed weird. So let's break this down because we have a new colony forming, the New England colony. And it was established by Puritans who did not want to break away from the Church of England, but wanted to see change, right? So this group of people came over to where the separatist Puritans are. And what was their motivation? Well, I can't tell you. We have to read some more, but you have to look at that dynamic for yourself. You have to be mindful of that dynamic. And they performed well better, and they were prepared better than the Jamestown and Plymouth. So they had a better experience in making an economy and doing all that good stuff. A typical Puritan New England town was centered around the Commons, or a central pasture for all to use. The meeting house, which was the main religious and community building, overlooked the Commons. Nearby was a tavern, which was the main social institution for the community. Although drunkenness was frowned upon, drinking itself was acceptable, because beer was often safer to drink than water. Thus, early New England towns mandated that taverns be as close to the meeting house as possible, so that congregants could take a break from long Sunday services to warm up before returning to worship. There were some residences in town for the artisans, such as the blacksmiths, cobblers, and those connected to shipping. The farmers' residencies extended out from the commons, with the wealthy and prosperous having more and better land than poorer families. So that is how a typical New England colony sort of works. And just like my A-Push class, I'm sure in your A-Push class, you guys will physically look at a map of a New England colony and try to draw some conclusions based off of what you see. Can you believe this is tap water? I know, it's crazy. You can drink tap water in California. You can in New Orleans, but I don't trust it. For several years, the Massachusetts Bay Charter was used as a constitution for the company. See this? See that? Governmental power in the Bay Colony rested with the General Court, or the shareholders, who then elected the governor and his assistants. The right to vote and hold office was limited to male church members called freemen. It was not considered democratic in the modern sense, but the system was considered a practical democracy based on the relationship between the clergyman and the freemen who voted. At least in local affairs, the General Court developed powers and a structure similar to England's Parliament. It had two houses, the House of Assistants, which was similar to the House of Lords, and the House of Deputies, which was similar to the House of Commons. Meanwhile, each community held town hall meetings made up of qualified male residents that managed local affairs, usually electing a moderator to officiate over meetings. Before leaving England, the Massachusetts Bay Colony elected its first governor, John Winthrop. You'll hear that name more, who was a well-off English lawyer. Winthrop believed that their venture was divinely inspired and that he had been called by God to lead the new experiment. He served as governor of the Bay Colony for over a decade. During the trip to the New World, Winthrop gave a sermon called A Model of Christian Charity, during which he outlined God's purpose for the Bay Colony. we shall be a city set on a hill. So alright, that's a wrap. Let me explain what he meant. A city up on a hill. Picture a hill. Okay, I'm sorry if I was in my home office, where I have a whiteboard, I would draw this. But picture a, hold on. So I know my drawing will be bad, so picture a hill, right? And this is the city on a hill with lights and buildings and all this and houses and all this and people and things and things. So that's the city on a hill. And what he was alluding to was this was the United States, the USA, right? That was the USA, that was his whole point. And the people on the bottom of the hill that was looking up at the USA they were looking up. This was rest of the world. So here we go. The rest of the world was looking up to the United States to set an example, to be this example. Okay, the Puritan religion. Let's break down the Puritan religion, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll go further. The Puritan religion. As the Puritans migrated from England to the New World, they had a clear vision of what their churches should be like. Membership was restricted to those who could present evidence that they had experienced saving grace. This most often included a compelling description of some extraordinary experience that indicated immediate intimate contact with God. Only those who could submit this proof was considered visible saints and allowed full membership in the church. In the early 17th century, however, few were denied membership since leaving England was considered sufficient proof for spiritual purity. So they had to show an experience with God, and leaving for America from England was enough to merit that experience. Puritans led their lives based on a group of strong beliefs, one of which was predestination. They felt that all events are foreknown and ordained by God, and that God chose who was saved and who was damned. They enjoyed life, but they also had a clear picture of the fate of the damned, and they believed that hellfire was very well. As was evident by their migration to the New World, Puritans also wished to purge their churches of every remnant of Roman Catholic ritual and practice, retaining only those customs and practices that the New Testament described for the early Christian church. They felt that this was their chance to build a completely new community with new institutions. So, okay, I'm gonna cut this short because I need to do something. But they felt that they needed to be separate from the Romans and make their own religion and make their own beliefs. And they set up the Massachusetts Bay Colony to do just that. So see you guys in part 2 of this video. Hope you like